Joe, breaking it apart, I've been going through these various counts, and I always, for great respect, you guys as the experts, but it kind of reminds me of term papers I wrote in college where, the professor would say it has to be a minimum of 30 pages. And I really had only 10 pages of good stuff. So I just kind of did weird things with an additional 20 pages to make the 30-page count. I don't want to trivialize it to that degree, but I do question what is new here that others who looked at decided to take a pass.
Neil, you must have been some student. Nothing is new. This is two things scream to me from this indictment as weakness. One is the overcharging, as you just pointed out. This could and should have been one charge. And that's exactly what federal prosecutors, that's the standard that we had to abide by. We are told by the Justice Department not to overcharge. That's what's happened here. The other one is what you pointed out is not actually citing what the supposed crime that's being covered up with the accounting entries. And when asked at the press conference, District Attorney Bragg kind of defensively said, well, the law says we don't have to specify. And then he kind of threw out a couple of things. Well, there's New York State campaign law, which is interesting. There's federal campaign law. But the fact that they couldn't commit it in writing in the indictment screams to me that they are leaving themselves maximum flexibility, and they realize that's their vulnerability.
Can a judge, John, in this case, Judge Merchant in this case, say, all right, this looks like you padded this? He obviously has had a chance to look at the indictment in its full form and see a lot of this repetition and see that maybe for every indictment, and it's really 4 parts to it, so it would be a lot fewer indictments otherwise. And then where does he take it from there? Would he have taken such action now? Not that he would have been dismissed, today, but where does this go? Especially when I hear talk of a hearing that doesn't come until December this year and arguments and motions that are placed in the fall of this year. Then what?
I expect that President Trump's lawyers will make motions to just dismiss this case right away, never even let it get to trial because of these legal flaws. As you say, Neil, overcharging, where you've got 34 counts. It really looks like just 2 counts. Where you have, in fact, as you've just pointed out, there's no description of what the crime actually is that leads this to be a felony. President Trump might have a good case that he's being charged by a vague law, that criminal laws have to be precise. You have to be precisely told what's illegal. Otherwise, your due process rights have been violated. He can also claim that Bragg is not allowed to try to prosecute federal law, here the election laws, by pretending it's some kind of state misdemeanor or felony. The Supreme Court has said that that's unconstitutional. There's so many, and then you've got one last one. All this happened well outside the statute of limitations. You either have 2 years for a misdemeanor in New York, 5 years for a felony to bring a case. Both of those clocks have expired. So I think what's going to happen is that Trump's lawyers, as you said, Neil, in the early fall, are going to make all these motions. A judge is going to have to rule on them. You're going to have oral arguments, and that could go on appeal through the New York court system all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court before any juror is even questioned for impaneling, before any opening statements are ever made in front of a juror.
But just to be clear on what you're saying there, John, would it be up to this judge to say, all right, there's nothing here?
Right. This judge can make that ruling initially. As you might have heard, Attorney General Barr, I think, put his finger on it. But he's unlikely to.
Well, he's unlikely. This judge would be very unlikely to, right?
It would be extraordinary if he did, given what allegedly is his past track record and how he's handled the other Trump cases. But some judge in the system between him and the U.S. Supreme Court would have the ability to do that, and hopefully would.
Joe, stepping back from this, I know we're all the same in the eye of the law, and I get that. But we saw what this has created over the last 48 hours. So traffic stopped on roads, New York City ground to a halt, the FDR cleared. I can't tell you how many times I've traveled on the FDR. it was never cleared for me. I don't know why, but it never was. And I'm thinking of everything upended. So you like to think there is something of considerable gravitas to justify upending a city, upending a country. I'm not saying the president is above the law and the details of the law, but there ought to be a very good reason to pursue what's being pursued and to justify all of that massive disruption. And I wonder whether this cuts that. What do you think?
Neil, if there's ever a case that screams for the need of wise prosecutorial discretion, this is that case. Put aside the fact that it's probably time barred. Put aside the fact that it probably relies on a legal theory that now we see is really tenuous at best. Let's say the district attorney's office really believes in its case. But to that point, you're talking about upending a presidential campaign and indicting for the first time, a former president. So the fact that you have all these vulnerabilities in your case and you move forward anyway and upended the city and the entire political system here, not to mention the view of America in the world today. I mean, I'm just shocked by the fact. I didn't think they would actually do it. I was wrong.
Gentlemen, maybe just in case, stand by if you don't mind. I do almost anything the president says tonight, if he talks about a travesty of justice, this is a sham, this is a witch hunt, we got to take our nation back. Any one of those could be buzzwords or trigger words to the judge who could, come down on him like a ton of bricks. I don't know with any one of those instances that would be the case, but offensive language is in the eye of the beholder. And should the former president be limited to that? It's one thing with a picture, him with a bat and Alvin Bragg does a picture nearby. I get that. But, if this is meant to intimidate him or freeze him in place, what do you think?
Well, Neil, I agree with Professor Yu that I'm glad the judge didn't go down the gag order road, because I think that would have been really borderline unconstitutional and very difficult to enforce, and it would have brought us down a bad path. I think President Trump's going to have to be careful. I mean, I think he will have to think about anything he says through the filter of it's going to be heavily scrutinized. And if someone believes that some kind of his speech can be, turned into something that can be seen as inspiring violence or encouraging rioting, they could run to the judge and say he should be shut down. I think Judge Merchan will try very hard to get over his reputation as being anti-Trump. So I think he probably doesn't want to go down that road either. But again, that would be front and center on my mind as part of Donald Trump's defense team to really try to keep him under control.
All right, we're showing the Trump indictment date breakdown here. There are a lot of them, and it goes to 34. But, gentlemen, the way it looks is it really centers on hush money with originally a porn star. But all of a sudden, this is extended into a charge of a broader scheme to pay off yet another woman, a doorman, during the 2016 campaign. Again, I go back to these being business transactions conducted at the president's business. These were not taxpayer funds. I'm not justifying this, and the president has denied all of this. But I'm looking at this and just wondering what we're in for now and where this likely goes now, John. What do you think?
First, you're going to have all those legal challenges we've been discussing. Then you're going to have, suppose we get by that, then you're going to have, I assume, a motion to move the location of the trial because President Trump already has told us he doesn't believe he can get a fair trial in New York. But suppose the judge here doesn't grant that. Then you're going to have the whole show of trying to go through each potential juror and ask them if they're biased. And each side is going to try to get into their background. So that's going to take a long time. I think it's going to be quite a while before we ever actually get to the opening statements of the prosecution and the defense before a jury that's sitting and both sides have accepted. This trial judge might let all these legal questions go up on appeal all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and suspend any kind of proceedings until they get a final answer. That could easily push this close to actually the 2024 elections, which would really, I hope not, but it could really distort the November 2024 elections.
Without being a cynic, Joe, you could start thinking that was the intention.
You know, Neil, I had the same thought that this really could be a stalling action, right? It's just buying time to keep negative information about Donald Trump in the news until possibly one of the other investigations takes over the headlines. So this is definitely the weakest of the investigations Donald Trump is facing. It's the oldest. It's the one that us commentators have doubted the most. So it definitely could be the strategy here.